You're listening to the Valley Labor Report with David Story and Jacob Morrison.
Kenzo Shibata is the functional vice president of the Chicago Teachers Union. He is the host of a fantastic podcast and YouTube show, Class Time with Kenzo Shibata. And obviously, he's an educator. He's a teacher in Chicago. As a consumer of media myself, I've been seeing teachers get hit from all sides, from the right, certainly, but also people who are ostensibly liberal or on the left. And no teachers are being hit harder than the Chicago Teachers Union. So naturally, that's who I wanted to talk to because, I think fundamentally the coverage that they're getting is really radically lopsided against the workers and in favor of the boss. And so I wanted to talk to Kenzo. And so, Kenzo, brother, thanks for taking the time to talk to us today. I really appreciate it.
Jacob, David, thank you both so much for having me on. I really appreciate that. I'm really excited about this, the show and the project you're working on, and glad to be sharing the CTU story with y'all.
Absolutely. We're really excited to have you on. So before we get into what it's like to be a teacher in the pandemic and the reopening fights, stuff like that, I wanted to pay tribute really quick to Karen Lewis. She was the president of the Chicago Teachers Union. And she, along with others, really transformed the Chicago Teachers Union from sort of a complacent, kind of inactive union into really one of the most powerful unions in the country. And I think that anybody that's really deep into the labor movement knows her name and knows what she was able to accomplish and really aspires to be like half or a quarter as effective an organizer as she was. And you got to be right there with her. Like, what was that? What was that like?
Life-changing. That's the bottom line was, knowing Karen even a little bit is life-changing, but I got to know her really well. Like when we were first forming a reform group within our union called CORE. Basically, the way a union work is you can form a caucus within your union of members who feel a certain way about something. And we were very passionate about ending school closings because those were happening at a very fast clip as a part of this privatization scheme from our old mayor. The scheme was called Renaissance 2010. And the idea was to build 100 new schools, 2/3 of which would be privatized or charters over the course of 10 years. And Karen and, a number of other folks, Jackson Potter, Carol Kareff, Nate Goldbaum, we came together and we literally were hatching our schemes at Karen Lewis's kitchen table and before anything else happened. And she was someone that became a huge political mentor to me and not just to me. And, you don't want to say like, you want to say like, a movement doesn't need charismatic leaders. But what Karen gave us is not just, she wasn't just a charismatic leader. She trained a lot of us to like her methods of politics. And, I would say that the reason why the CTU has been capable of continuing on this fight since she retired was because of the lessons she imparted upon us. So it just, it's been a rough couple of weeks, realizing she's not going to be there with us anymore in physical, in physical self. But she has been working her butt off.
You can say
organizing.
You can say yes.
Teaching. I can? Cool.
You just
for decades. She deserves the rest now. I think that's kind of what we've all been saying is that people keep saying rest in power, but we're like, she deserves some peace right now. Yeah. She's had almost 70 years of power.
And what you said is really speaks to a lot that I talk about constantly is we try not to have the type of leaders that gatekeep. We're constantly in unions, we have leaders that want to maintain power, and everything that I've read from Karen, showed that she was the type of leader, and you spoke to it, that brought up everybody around her and helped train those and created a movement instead of a one-person show.
Right.
And I think that's important in unionism, is that solidarity amongst everyone.
And I think the result of her work kind of speaks for itself.
Yeah.
All across the world, you get these left-wing movements. A lot of times they happen in politics in the electoral arena, but that they center around a person. I mean, you know, we can look at Bolivia for an example of that. You know, Evo Morales did a lot of good for the people of Bolivia, and he built up a real big base of support. But you know, he was worried that he wanted to coalesce and keep power for himself, and so he went against the term limits. And you know, we had a whole series on Bolivia, and like obviously there was a coup there, but like there's a lot to criticize Evo for. And Karen Lewis, she's gone now, and she's not been the president of the Chicago Teachers Union for some time, and y'all are still fighting, y'all are still powerful. That's the kind of leaders that we need, the leaders that build up movements that can fight and sustain themselves after they're gone.
Also, what I loved about Karen, what made her so effective as a leader of teachers, specifically Chicago public school teachers, she taught for 23 years, and she taught for most of that time at Lane Tech, which is a school on the north side. But it was a magnet school, so it attracted students from all over the city. And then towards the end of her teaching career, she taught at Martin Luther King College Prep, which is on the south side in actually the community she lived in. And so when we were first campaigning in 2010 for CORE to elect her as president, people knew who she was. People were like, she taught a lot of people who then in turn became teachers. So many schools we went to, people had a Miss Jennings story. That was her maiden name. And, you know, you'd go and you'd hand out flyers, and you'd talk about CORE, and they'd be like, oh, Miss Jennings. Cool. Right. I remember Miss Jennings. And if you think about it, there's only 600 schools in the CPS. And to run into like people like that, I mean, I think that's also something that we should look at as organizers, having that. I don't think Karen, when she first started teaching, wanted to become the president of the union, but just her being such a great teacher and such a, you know, totally part of her own communities, not like an outsider, that paid off in the end. And I think that's something that, you know, young leaders can kind of look at, like just build these relationships over time, maybe before you run for something.
Right. Yeah.
Not that people shouldn't run. You know, Jacob, you're, a leader, and I'm very proud of that. But, you know, there are some cases where people get a little hasty, I say.
No, yeah, I think that's right. And I think that, I think that it's good for people to, to do the work and to try to make those relationships before, you know, like we're restarting the North Alabama Labor Council here in the area. And, there was a couple folks who encouraged me to run for president of the council. And I was like, well, you know, I'm not, you know, I've only been a union member now for like 2 or 3 years, and to be the president of a labor federation in an area, you know, I'm not sure, you know, I want to do as much work as I can and as much good work, but I want to take some time and learn from folks and build those relationships and build confidence in people. And you know, that on your last podcast, you talked about how that would be something that you would like from to be at the head of the Board of Education in the board of Chicago Public Schools. You'd like somebody that was a real educator, that that somebody that if you were to have a boss, you'd like the boss to be somebody that was actually an educator and wasn't somebody that just went into teaching so that they could be in administration or just come out of schools. And I think that goes for leaders of all stripes. It would really be good to have leaders that are kind of reticent to be leaders, that want to be workers, that want to be movement folks, but like they're so good at it that everyone pushes them up into leadership.
And I think with that, even beyond having the head of the schools be an educator, I want the head of the schools to be accountable to the community.
Yeah.
And that, I think, is, if you go into Chicago, to back up a little bit, we have an appointed school board that is completely appointed by the mayor, who in 1995 got complete control of the schools. And naming the entire Board of Education gives them so much power. They always name people that are accountable to them politically and not to the students, parents, and taxpayers, for example.
Right.
In our communities, what we have where you have an elected school board, you go grocery shopping at the same stores as people on your school board. So like, if you're really unhappy with something that's going, you could say, hey, I'm out getting milk. I run into the president of the school board. I'm going to bend your ear for a minute. Right. And they know that like people are going to keep bending their ear until they do what the community wants. We don't have that. And, I think that's also another thing, to go back to Karen a bit. She lived in the community she taught. And she was very accountable. She knew her neighbors. Her neighbors knew her. She made no secret about the neighborhood she lived in. And, she took good and bad from that. Like, she definitely was the target of harassment because of that. But also she was constantly listening to people and listening to their problems, and not just to teachers, but to parents and students.
We're going to pick that up on the other side of the break. Stay tuned.
You're listening to the Valley Labor Report with David Story and Jacob Morrison.
Thanks for tuning in, folks. Here's an announcement right at the top. The North Alabama DSA is holding a necessities drive every Saturday. That means this Saturday from 3 to 5 p.m. at the IBEW Local Union Hall, Local 558 Union Hall, on Clinton Avenue, right across from Yellowhammer and Campus 805 in Huntsville. So if you're in the area, you want to drop off some clothes, some non-perishable food items, blankets, then swing by the IBEW Union Hall right across from Yellowhammer and Campus 805 from 3 to 5 p.m. this Saturday and every Saturday. Follow at DSA North Alabama on Twitter for more information.
And all of that merchandise is going to the Manor House. So it's being distributed very well, and they really need PPE as well. So if you've got hand sanitizer, go by Costco and support the Teamsters out there and pick up some hand sanitizer and take it over to them, or some masks.
Yep. So if you want to see what we're up to throughout the week, get our snide quips about the news of the day, then you should follow us on social media. We're on Facebook at facebook.com/The Valley Labor Report. We're on Twitter at Labor Reporters. I'm on Twitter at JacobM_AL. David is on Twitter at Radical Unionist. That's spelled RADICL Unionist. If you missed part of the show and want to go back and watch it later, you can search YouTube for The Valley Labor Report and subscribe to our channel. You can go back and watch the full show there, and we clip segments and release them throughout the week. We also upload the program on more than 11 different podcasting apps. So to see if we are on your listening platform of choice, go to thevalleylaborreport.transistor.fm/subscribe. We've got a website, thevalleylaborreport.org. And finally, if you appreciate our work and want to help us stay on the air, then consider throwing us a couple dollars a month on patreon.com/thevalleylaborreport.